Adapted from the story The Promised Land, the 1966 film Black Girl tells the story of Diouana, a young woman from Senegal who goes with her employers to their home in the French Riviera under false pretenses. Having promised her opportunity in a new land, her employers confine her to their home, forcing her to perform labor to which she never agreed, treating her as a commodity to show off to friends, and, in short, failing to recognize her humanity. The result, perhaps inevitably, is tragedy. Often called the father of African cinema, writer-director Ousmane Sembène uses polemical style to convince audiences that colonialism's devastating effects do not vanish after a colonized people declares independence. Between 1881 and 1914, during the time referred to as the Scramble for Africa, 7 European powers claimed African land as their own. France claimed much of Western Africa, including the land that became Senegal, which achieved independence in 1960. Sembène, who lived there during both colonial and post-colonial periods, sought to expose France's lingering damage to his people. Diwana grows up in a poor village outside Dakar, Senegal's capital. Young and hopeful, she aspires to find work and, as she assumes, a better life. After an unsuccessful job search, Diwana meets on a street corner the woman who will employ her, and whom the film simply calls Madame. Diwana sits beside several girls who literally leap at the opportunity to work for Madame, who, with hidden surveilling eyes, is akin to someone casually window shopping for goods. A red flag that Diwana, once hired, will be treated as nothing other than a commodity. Favoring Diwana's restrained sitting on the curb, Madame hires her, allegedly to take care of her children. Thrilled, Diwana accepts the position, and after working for Madame and her husband, the Monsieur, for some time, the couple invites her to live with and work for them in Antibes, France. Promised adventure, Diwana's excitement intensifies. Others, however, are wary. Her optimism upsets her boyfriend, associated with the cause for independence, and he yells at her hopping atop a monument commemorating national heroes who have fallen. This juxtaposition of the monument and Diwana's lofty aspirations signals a disconnect between the violent reality that Diwana's people have faced and the false idealism instilled in her and her people by the French colonizers, who have presumptuously privileged their own life and land as the paradigms to which the whole of humanity ought to aspire. Diwana's expectations begin to crumble immediately upon her arrival in France. Disoriented in a land she has never seen, a mass of white people stare at her. Their gazes convey suspicion and contempt. They make her feel unwelcome in their country. They also make her feel conscious of her race for the first time. In his short story, Sembène writes about Diwana's newfound race consciousness. At Dakar, the problem of the color of her skin had never arisen. She realized that here she was not only quite alone, but she had nothing in common with others. And this made her feel ill. It infected her whole life and the air she breathed. Sembène's description bears remarkable similarity to the idea of double consciousness, developed by the prominent writer W.E.B. DuBois, who writes particularly about African Americans. In the 1903 text, The Souls of Black Folk, DuBois states, "The Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with a veil, and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of a world that looks on in amused contempt and pity." Although Du Bois writes about African Americans in particular, the experience of double consciousness can be found in any place and by any person who suffers race-based injustice. Conscious not only of her selfhood, but also of her position as a racialized other, Diwana indeed suffers a double consciousness. The mise-en-scène of the French villa where she works emphasizes her race-based anxiety by highlighting the contrast between black and white. And I don't just mean that the film is a black and white production. Both the floor and the door display black and white stripes, and Diwana herself wears a white dress, an effort to engage in French fashion. This racialized binary entraps Diwana, whom others see as less than human. Diwana is also trapped like a prisoner in her employer's villa. Though her employers hired her to care for their children, they force her to clean, cook, and cater to guests who stereotype her, one of whom takes the liberty to kiss her without consent. They do not allow her to explore France, and so for Diwana, All of France becomes the villa. Sembène writes, "The whole country contracted to the boundaries of the villa. Slowly but surely, she was sinking under it all. Her wide outlook in the past was narrowed down to the color of her skin, which suddenly instilled her with terror. Her skin, her blackness. Fearfully, she took refuge within herself. Her employers restrict Diwana to dehumanizing racist stereotypes. To them, she is akin to the mask she gifted them. They treat her as a fetishized and racialized commodity, with which they may do as they please." While her employers fail to see Diwana's humanity, Sembène gives us her complex thoughts through voiceover. Often this voiceover undercuts the complacency of her employers, their family, and their guests. During the dinner scene, for example, as they hold themselves with self-perceived sophistication, commenting on what they call genuine African cooking, along with their tolerance to spicy food, Diwana thinks about their piggishness.
Qu'est-ce qu'ils mangent, iradotent, ces gens?
While she worries about pleasing them, she must meet their standards, after all, in order to get paid. She also maintains her astute sense of judgment. Sembène invites the audience, through Diwana's voice, to arrive at similar judgments. Sembène also constructs this critique visually. Consider the scene in which Madame and Monsieur fight. While Madame chastises the Monsieur for threatening her perceived right to a relaxing vacation, Diwana works like a slave in the background. This visualization of the foregrounded couple and the backgrounded Diwana makes a twofold commentary. It shows both how the couple privileges their own struggles, which aren't really struggles, and how they fail to see Diwana actually struggling. Whereas they ought to see the loneliness and injustice of Diwana's situation, they are only able to see themselves. They too are trapped, albeit in their own prejudices and privileges. As the long days go on, Diwana's struggle worsens. Her voiceover gives not only her judgments, but also her repetitive ruminations, which convey her sense of entrapment. By the film's end, we hope for her escape as she refuses slavery, reclaims the mask as well as her hair, and packs her bag. We expect her to leave, but she doesn't. She can't. At last her employers find her bleeding out in the bathtub. Her escape has been suicide. Oblivious to this tragedy, the French locals sunbathe by the ocean. One man opens a newspaper, and we find Diwana's life reduced to a small middle-section story. The world that has killed her won't even recognize her in death. However, Sembène does not let this world have the final word. He gives this instead to Diwana's relatives back home. Monsieur decides to take Diwana's belongings, the mask, and some money to her family in Dakar. Specifically, he seeks out her mother. He finds her, and in a particularly poignant moment, Diwana's mother refuses the money. The Monsieur cannot understand this refusal. He himself has become a slave to money and commodification. But for Diwana and her people, the response is resistance. In her refusal of the money, Diwana's mother seems to say, "No, your money cannot pay off the tragedy of my daughter's death. She was not a commodity, but a life." Considering again that Diwana represents Africa, we can also read this moment as commentary on how European colonizers cannot simply pay off the damage they inflicted on a colonized Africa. The damage lingers, the accountability remains, the wound continues to bleed. And Sembène won't let us forget it. In the film's final scene, a boy reclaims the mask, transforming it back from a commodity, as it was featured in the French villa, to the living legacy of his people. Satisfied with his return of Diwana's belongings, the Monsieur heads back home, but the boy won't let him rest in satisfaction. The boy follows Monsieur, wearing the mask and haunting him. Like Diwana's mother, his actions convey that the Monsieur, and all the colonizers, cannot simply pay off and forget the suffering that they have caused. Colonialism lingers as a ghost that haunts us all. But Sembène's film is not without hope. I think that the final image is not only a reminder of the painful past, but also a call for a better future. In a centered, medium close-up shot, the boy pulls down the mask from his face. His face is vulnerable, resilient, and incredibly human. This is the face of one who, through no doing of his own, inherits the violence that came before him. He, too, must suffer the wounds. Yet it is also the face of a child, of one who will grow up into a still unforged future. While we cannot change the past, the film suggests that we can learn from it. Such an attitude won't bring back the lives that have been lost. All of those losses are irrevocable tragedies. We can, however, commit to remembering those lives. That remembrance can call us to treating present and future lives with dignity and respect, and forging a better world of justice and love.